Sri Lanka is an island country east of the south end of India. It was formerly known as Ceylon. The main airport in the country is called Colombo, but it's much closer to Negombo than it is to Colombo. We arrived a day before our tour began, so we had an opportunity to take a walk on the beach. The water seemed to be warm, although we didn't really go in. It didn't look very appealing since it didn't seem to be very clear. Since we were there, I did a panorama of the beach, so you could see kind of what's going on. There's a lot of new building, a lot of new tourism. The country has, from my perspective, the high point of our trip was the food. The food was fantastic. According to Diane's perspective, it's better than the food in India, although it's comparable dishes, but they seem somehow to taste better here. Sri Lanka is known for its spices. Our first stop after we left Negombo was at a spice plantation. We had an opportunity to see several spices on the plants on which they grew, in addition to seeing these pineapples that I have pictures of here. Then we visited a tea plantation and factory, and I didn't take any pictures there, so I have none of those. Then we proceeded on to Kandy, K-A-N-D-Y. At Kandy, we visited the Temple of the Sacred Tooth. It's a Buddhist temple where they have a relic which is a tooth of Buddha. Like many other places of worship around the world, it is very ornate. These are some views from the grounds of the temple. I'd like to also mention that while we were in Kandy, we went to a botanical garden, and while we were at the botanical garden, I did some videos, so there is a separate video specifically on the subject of the botanical garden. We stayed at the Hilltop Inn in Kandy. This is a view from the hilltop. Along one of the roads we found this Hindu shrine, so I got several pictures of it along the way. After a picnic on a lake, we made our way to the train station at Hapatali, and from there we went to a town called Ella by train. After seeing these tracks, I had reservations about getting on the train. On our way up to the top of the mountain, we passed a little village. I was intrigued by all the flowering trees. Sri Lanka does have significant mountains. They actually have two different monsoon seasons. The mountains in the middle make one monsoon season effective when the winds are from the southwest, and the other monsoon is effective on the northeast side of the island when they come from the northeast. The roads are very slow. You can see how slow traffic is moving down below. I used to do hill climbs. This would have made a good road for a hill climb. Passing on these roads is pretty amazing. People pass on corners. It's amazing there aren't more accidents than there are. We didn't see any, but I've been told that it's a pretty dangerous place to drive. The ride was bumpy and there was some sway, but we remained on the tracks. The following day, our group hiked to a peak overlooking a large valley, and on that day Diane stayed behind and was entertained by monkeys at the hotel. After the hike, part of our group, including me, took a cooking class. That afternoon, we took a hike to a historic bridge that had intended to be made from metal, but because of war shortages, ended up being made from brick. On our second day in Ella, we were able to go to this falls, which we could see from the high peak on the other side. In fact, these falls are down by the lodge that we could see in the previous videos. And down near these falls, of course, there were a lot of monkeys. They're always fun to watch. The Utawalawi Game Reserve is known for its elephants. So we had a morning safari there and an afternoon safari at Yala, which was known for leopards. These elephants are Asian elephants, and they seem to be much smaller than the ones we saw in Africa. Their ears are smaller, and we didn't see any really large elephants like we had seen in Africa. Since the vegetation is quite lush, we were probably near a whole lot of elephants that we didn't see. There are a lot of birds in the reserves. These are green bee eaters. If you look quick here, you'll see the mongoose. This is a blue-tailed bee eater. Peacocks were quite common here. We saw numerous ones. Wikipedia says this is probably a gray heron. Painted storks like this one were rather common. They're kind of fun to watch when they're feeding. The white bird is an egret. The black ones are little black cormorants. This is an Indian roller. He's a little less colorful than the African ones. Both wild and domesticated water buffalo are common in Sri Lanka. This appears to be a black-winged stilt. Here you might be able to catch some glimpses of a mongoose moving among the foliage. I'm guessing this is a female gray heron. It doesn't seem to be quite as decorated as the male. And here we have another painted stork. This is a common kingfisher. I think this one's a Chinese pond heron. It's common for cormorants to dry their wings by finding a safe place and spreading their wings and letting the wind dry them out. Here's another Indian roller. They're called rollers because they tilt left and tilt right as they're flying. Looks like they're trying to roll. This monitor lizard was probably 6 or 7 feet long. Hard to tell here. This might be a purple rump sunbird. This is their common garden lizard. We were calling these fish eagles on the trip, but it looks like it might be a white-bellied sea eagle. In Sri Lanka, there are several kinds of hawk eagles that have what appear to be horns or feathers sticking out of their heads. More water buffalo staying cool in the heat of the day. I would not want to be in that water. Yala is known as a leopard reserve. Unfortunately, we didn't see any leopards. But we did see some other interesting animals. This is a spotted deer, spotted buck. Probably larger than most of our mule deer. I'd call this guy a chicken, but in Sri Lanka he's called a jungle fowl. There are all kinds of mongooses. This is a ruddy mongoose. And this version is a wild pig, essentially. It's called a boar. And here are a couple of crocodiles in the shade. Some spotted deer way off in the distance. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a good view of the color of these birds because the sun was on the other side of them. He's called a chestnut-headed bee-eater. Really a pretty bird. Looks very coppery. An egret on a water buffalo. And Yala had some elephants too. And they have owls too. This is a brown fish owl. I don't know. Someone must have seen it flying to the tree because you certainly wouldn't see it just sitting there. And they even have traffic jams in the game reserve. These elephants obviously have plenty to eat. There are several sleeping crocodiles on the other side of this pond. Of course, they sleep with their mouths open. Very white, actually, in their mouths. From this point, we headed to the airport, indirectly, for our flight to the Maldives, where we would spend the next 3 weeks.